Hello and welcome to another episode of Behind the Tactics Board with Jamie Harrison and myself, Stuart Beeho. This week we're going to be having a conversation about individual player reviews.
So over the last 2 weeks, you've been busy working on the individual player reviews for the members of your under 15 squad.
Yeah.
What has that actually involved?
So the whole review of for the players is saying how well they've done, areas of improvement, and an action plan sort of going forward as well.
So as part of the review, there is a written form that we provide to the players and the parents. How you found using that template?
The template's really good, helps guide the coaches of what they want to be looking for, and obviously trying to build up that full picture for the player. The template I was using was a bit more designed for the older age groups, so there's a bit more tactical awareness as well as the individual skills as well.
Okay, can you give us any examples of how you tweaked that for the under 15 age group?
It's just having that knowledge of, does the player need to know what to do when the team's in possession, out possession, what their role might be within that team, along with the 1v1s, ball mastery. So it's having that technical element for the older boys, because we need to be pushing their knowledge, not just their skills as well.
Okay, so that was the writing of the review, and then you've delivered it last week as well, didn't you, to your players and parents? How did you find that?
It was good. Fortunately, I've done a few in the past, so I'm a bit more experienced of how it goes. So it was a little bit hard work, constantly talking for 4 hours when it's back-to-back reviews. But luckily, because I built up that relationship with the players and the parents, that they are just quite a relaxed conversation. And I think that's the most important thing that I always said to them, because it's a new experience for some of the boys, that it is just a conversation. It's not like a school parents' evening. It's nothing to really be worried about. It's just a conversation. At the end of the day, I always said to him, it's just my opinion of where I think that player is, just to make sure that they're relaxed, they're supported, and but most importantly, they've got a plan of going forward as well.
And did you find the players got involved in the conversations? Because I know with some of the younger players, they find it difficult to communicate themselves clearly to the parents or to the coaches. How did you find your players?
Yeah, so bear in mind, they are most of them 15 now as well. So my first question to every single player was, how do you think your season's been? A few grunts, but I think quite typically most people don't like to big themselves up as well, regardless of the age group. So a lot of them was like, oh, it's been okay. Or, they started talking a bit negative, and especially some of the players who I think they've been having their best season ever, they don't appreciate. And I think at the same time, it feels awkward when they big themselves up, doesn't it? It does for anybody. So I got them to be engaged in the conversation. I made sure that the player was sat near me and the parents were one side, so there wasn't something in the way of us, just to make sure the conversation was directed between the player and the coach. So I got them involved as much as I could do for a 15-year-old.
And did the parent try to take control of the conversation, or did they allow the 15-year-old to vocalise their thoughts?
Fortunately enough, the parents realised what the whole process was and sat back. A lot of them didn't say anything, so every question I asked the player, quite often the player would look to the parent, and then the parent would go, he's asked you, which was good.
Yeah.
Right at the end, so we had 15-minute time slot, so I was conscious of the timings, but making sure I used most of that time up to work with the player, and then the question and answers was very limited, to make sure there was a full-on conversation for the parent to have that opportunity. But like I say, most of my parents were fine, and I did open up the questions to players and parents at the end, and if any parent did have a question, it was only 1 or 2 questions. It wasn't anything too awkward.
Yeah. I find these individual chats are probably the most valuable things you have throughout the whole season. So obviously you have your chats during team training sessions to the whole group. But I find the individual chats you have and these reviews are really insightful for one to give your opinion, and for it to be a shared opinion written down so it's recorded, but also to get those little bit of nuggets from the player. So, like for one example, is we had a younger player who we asked to play up in an age group, And through an individual chat with him, said he's a little bit reluctant to do it. And he's a little bit, he'd rather stay in the comfort of his own age group rather than go where he should be, where his ability is, he's capable of doing it, and the challenge will be right in that age group. But he said, I don't think I'm good enough. Whoa. And this kid is a confident kid that you would think from the outside, a confident kid. But through having these individual chats, you get that little bit of information. Well, okay, so what could I do better to make sure he knows he's a good player and to have that self-confidence? Because when you're more confident, you're going to perform better as well, aren't you? So in order for them to be more comfortable and embracing that challenge a little bit more, what can we do as coaches? And whenever I speak with him, whatever we do in team training, how can we make sure that the environment's right for that player?
Yeah, and I've got a player who's really changed his position. He's gone from being a goalkeeper his whole life to an outfield player, an attacker player as well. So it's from one real big extremes, and he doesn't realise how big a step it was. So you got, I said, congratulations, your bravery and courage. It's very easy to go, I've got to be a goalkeeper now. But he's going, I don't want to be that. I want to enjoy my football, and I want to be this, which is absolutely brilliant. And because he's been working his whole life as a goalkeeper, he has to realise he's only been actually an outfield player for a season compared to his mates who have been doing it for a long time. Yeah. And so straight away he's like, oh, I know I'm not good enough. I know I'm not this. I'm like, but you've been doing really, really well. So it's that chance to have a sit-down conversation, go, you're doing brilliant. Realise what you've achieved, realise what you're doing. It's a real big challenge to do. And hopefully, I think it did come across, he was really positive at the end of it and sort of put him in going, no, I am doing all right, actually.
Yeah, that's good, because you don't always have that time of team training to have those individual chats to really show them that belief you have in them. I do think we need to do more of it. My thing would be to try and have 2 or 3 conversations with different individuals each week. So by the time the month comes around, you probably, if you do it at training and then match days, you probably had a chance to have a 5-minute individual chat, or 1 minute, 2-minute individual chat with each player, just to build that stronger relationship, and just to and I think the use of your open questions with the players is brilliant. Just to try and drag them out to feel more comfortable to talk to you, but also to get more information from them about how they are finding things, what they need to work on, and then for you to transfer that belief and your thoughts to that player as well.
And also with the targets that I've set them, by having these regular conversations, it's in the front of their mind, because it's very easy for people to say, oh, I've got to work on that, I'll put that to one side, think about it for a week, and then that's it done for the season. They don't think about what they need to be trying to achieve. So by having these regular conversations, how are you getting on with it? And it takes effort from the coach, but also it takes effort from the players. And obviously with the under-15s, I always say they've got to take control of their own development now. So that's where they have to be mindful of going, right, if he wants me to work on this, it has to be every week, every session that they have, every kick about in the park.
Yeah, and that's brilliant. And so not only does it help in their mind, give them that focus, but it also gives the coach a focus as well. So every conversation you have, you've now got a lead in with it, right? How are you getting on with, I don't know, your first touch, whatever the target is. How are you getting on with it? What are you doing to improve that? And then you can add layers of detail onto that target. So every conversation you're now having with that player, it is more focused. And every training session you now put on as a coach, you're thinking about those individual targets. You're not going to cover everything all in one session, because that's impossible. But there's a little bit of extra thought. Okay, this session, this practice, I can tweak it a little bit this way in order for little Johnny to be able to work on his thing and set these challenges for that player in order to improve that area he needs to work on.
It's also, I think it's a good opportunity to work with parents, because they're only seeing it from obviously side of the pitch, match days, or via a player. So you can use these conversations to have an indirect conversation with the parents for them to realise what we're working on, because they don't always know the details we want for their player to achieve and for the team to achieve. So I think it helps having conversation with parents as well, because they are obviously, we're all one team, coach, player, parent. And we all have to be working to help get the player get better.
I like that. And then hopefully the parents will see what we're in more detail, what we're looking at, and what we're focusing on. Not just from behind a fence watching the game each week, but they're more involved in the conversations. So then they'll have a conversation with their own son or daughter in more in line with how we're looking at the game. Because I believe probably at the start of the season, we were talking one way, they were probably thinking another. So now we're all coming together with the same purpose, is in order to improve little Bobby. And then that will then improve the team performance as well.
Yeah, and you can say little things of when the ball's here, when you're talking to the player and the parent, when the ball here, I want you here. So then there's something, it's obvious, it's visual, and then the parent can be going, oh, I remember from the review night, they mentioned this as your positioning. And again, before that, they didn't know. So they wouldn't know that the player was out of position, and now they've got a reference point to be working for. And then they, let's say, they'll have a conversation after the game, and they'll be going, oh, I noticed you weren't here, or why weren't you there? And build up that knowledge as well.
Yeah, I've been quite guilty of this as in an academy setting, where we've kept the parents at a distance. Quite often, a lot of our coaches, we want to keep the parents at a distance in fear of probably saying the wrong thing and leading the player in the wrong way, because it's such a big decision at the end of it, whether they get a pro contract or not, or the next contract of their schoolboy registration forms. So if you're saying, oh, you did that brilliant, and to the parent as well, you're worried that they're going to bring that back on you. So you quite often stay away from Now, I don't like that really. You want to say brilliant to little Johnny because you want to build his confidence up, to make him feel better in order to perform better. You don't want to have those words thrown back in your face, which is why then you build up that little bit of distance. I think where you've done really well is you've had that group for 3 years, and like you said, you built that relationship with not only the player, but now the parents as well. So they trust you, don't they?
Yeah.
So you can have those conversations. My challenge to any coach, and it's something that I do if ever I'm taking a team, like I said, I would try and speak to the individual player for 1 minute, 2 minutes every week on a cycle. So 3 players every week, 3 or 4 players every week I would get round to. Next week it'll be a different set of players. So I'm checking in with them on what their targets are and seeing how they are. So I'm having a check-up with them. After games, now I'm more confident in myself as a coach, or at training, I would involve the parent in these conversations as well. Because quite often the only time they get to see the coach or talk to the coach is at these review nights. Which again I think is wrong, because this relationship between coach and parent and player needs to be really strong in order to get the best out of little Bobby.
Yeah. So
by involving that parent a little bit more, then they're going to be on your side of things. And actually, again, you get that bit more insight of, I'm a bit fearful of what Big Bobby is going to say, so I'm going to treat little Bobby this way. Well, actually, Big Bobby's thinking the same way.
Yeah.
And sometimes even they have more insight into something that I haven't seen.
Yeah.
And okay, so if I approach it that way, maybe this, so by having those more conversations with the parents as well, I think that will really benefit your coaching, the players' progression, the development. And it's only something I've been able to do probably recently, because I feel more confident in my ability that because I've been doing it for so long now, whatever situation that's thrown at me, I can calmly deal with it. Whereas maybe when I was 15 years ago, in difficult conversations, I might have got a bit flustered. But now, through those experiences, I'm able to then speak more clearly, more calmly with the parent, and probably also the experience of being a parent as well to my boys. I know how I would like a coach to talk to my boys in order to make them better. Now, probably the coach who's taking my boys probably thinks they need to be a little bit soft on them. I don't want that. I want them to be tougher and to correct any mistake that they make.
Yeah.
I don't want them to be allowed to keep making those same mistakes without any correction, because they're not going to get better. And even a small thing of their behaviour, definitely. If they're misbehaving, don't let them keep misbehaving. I want you to be tough on them within boundaries, but I want you to be tough on them, because that's how I would like them to improve.
Yeah,
that's, I think, their role. And so by being a parent, I can understand the other parent situation. I can talk from a more experienced place of my experience with my kids as well. So I think that's put me in a better place as well.
Yeah, no, it's really been helpful working with the parents, because also when you work with the parents, then when the team or the players are having a bit of a wobble, it can be quite easy for the parents to say, "I don't go tonight," or anything. But because you've got that trust and bond with the parent, they'll be, "No, still go tonight." Then they will encourage the player to be going. Then the player will probably know that there's trust and a safe place for the player to go. So they're going to be working harder, and they know they're going to be fine. And when I did the review night, when I said at the end, "Have anyone got any questions?" most of the time it was no, because the parent always knows that they can speak to me anytime anyway. And I always said that at the end. I said, well, if you do walk away and you've got questions, you know you can speak to me whenever you like. So over the years, having that freedom of having conversations builds trust with the parents. That therefore has a knock-on effect to the player, and then all round it's just going to be a healthier environment for the player to learn in.
We have these reviews every 6 months at Poulton Rovers. I think that's about right for the demands on the coach, but also enough time for them to see a difference. So we have one in end of January, February, and then again start of the season, July, August, ready to shape the start of the next season. So that's your time to check in on how the progress. Obviously, you're going to be checking in weekly, monthly with that player as well. And like we said, those conversations are now shaped by the targets you set. At pro clubs in the foundation phase, so the under 9s to under 11s, some under 12s, they have these every 12 weeks, so every 3 months. They're expected required by the EPPP to have them every 12 weeks. In the under 12s and up, in the youth development phase and the pro development phase, so under 12s to under 18s, they have them every 6 weeks. So that's again another requirement from. So it's a lot of work for these pro academies, and all these reviews are put onto what they call the PMA. So everything's online for the parent and player to see. How are you going to use your reviews now? So brilliant, we've had the review, you've had some really important conversations with players and parents. What's the next step then? How do we take this into action?
So for me, again, like we've mentioned, is having these regular conversations with players, because I think if you put them to one side, then it's been a bit of a pointless task. So we have to make sure, and again, that's the triangle of coach, player, parent, have to constantly have these at the front of our mind of having these conversations regularly. And then when we're having the training sessions, making sure that these elements are there for the player. So it's going to be a bit more planning from the coach to making sure, okay, this week my main primary player for my session might be this, but my secondary players for their individual basis might be this, this, and this. So we have to make sure that we don't just fill out a piece of paper and push it to one side. And then throughout the remainder of the season, have those conversations, maybe start making notes myself, because I want to see a progression for the player throughout these next few months. I don't want to just take a snapshot of the player there and a snapshot of the player there. I want to see what his path's going to be. And it's going to be a big involvement for myself and the 3 people that I've mentioned. But that's what we're here for. End of the day, we want to make that player better. We don't want to just play football. It's enjoyable and we all love it, but we have to realise what role we have as impacting on that player. So we have to be making sure that we do go back to these reviews. We are seeing where they are. Are they going better? Are they dropping off? Do they need to be focused in a different way? But we have to be making sure that they're constantly being spoken about.
And that's where it's important, where they're recorded down, aren't they? So they've got a written form now where for you and the player to then, in a timeline of 6 months, right, we're going to see progression by the end of the season and for next season, and for you to keep checking on it. And if you can make notes yourself, even better, because again, you're recording it down. What they do at academies is through the PMA, sometimes every training session, I've known some clubs, every training session, they're commenting on that player's targets.
Right.
So the clubs I've been at, and some clubs that I've heard about as well, they would give a player an in possession target and an out of possession target, and maybe something around social corner as well. So every match, that player has that focus of, right, I'm going to think about my movement to receive, let's say, in possession. When they're defending, they're thinking about how I close down 1v1 defending. So they've got that focus. What we would do at a club is they would probably, in the younger ages, they would write it down on the board so they remember. So they're, it's not just on a computer. It's they're in their mind for the game. And then the coach would, after a game, would comment and feed back on that target. So how did little Bobby get on in that game around that target? So they're constantly thinking about these targets that they've got.
So I do plan to try and have, even on a match day, going through our team tactics, team challenges, but then having a few players that say, don't forget, this is what you need to be working on today. So it might only be 2 or 3. I think you've got to be careful of having that balance as a coach as well. All good endeavours of going, I'm going to be working on everybody's. You've got to be realistic. So maybe 2 players, possibly 3, but going, right, your challenge is your 1v1 defending. That's going to be your main focus today. And again, I think having it on the board, I think everything's, when you've got it visual, you can't hide away from it, can you? So that player will go, right, I'm going to be watched today. So it's going to be interesting to see how it impacts him on his performances as well.
Yeah. So I've known some clubs that they have those individual targets of in possession, out of possession, and they would write about it every training session for the whole squad. That is a ridiculous amount of work. So, and it's also becomes impossible. You can't cover everything at every training session. So the advice we have is to bullseye 1 or 2 players per session. So by the time, if you're having academies, if you're having 2 or 3 training sessions a week, by the month's up, you've got around every player. But having just a focus on, you've got the team training session going on, within that, it's really suited to these 1 or 2 players that they're going to be targeting their IDAP. Yep. So they're going to be able to work on that, and then you can comment and record your thoughts around those 2 players for that one session. So with the targets that were set at this meeting, was that all through you, or was some of it by the players?
So I did most of it. So I gave them an option for 1, but I only gave them 2, 1 tactical, 1 technical for each player, and then gave them the opportunity to add something. But I didn't want to overload them. I think, again, if you said, right, here's loads of things you've got to work on, it could be a bit overwhelming for a player. And then if they're only thinking about 1 here, there and everywhere, again, it's only little bits. It's not really going to drive them on. So like with the example I used earlier about 1v1 defending, it's right there. So the player knows what he's got to work on. So 1v1 defending, and maybe have a better knowledge about your role. So then you've got your technical of how he's defending, make sure he's going to be hard to beat, and then he's going to be learning about actually his position a bit more. So I really only limited it to 2 areas, to making sure they can't hide away in a way, but it's all there, it's all in front of them, and they've got a really strong focus. There's nothing, it's all achievable. So I think it's got to be measurable and achievable. So by doing your 1v1 defending, he's going to see a difference. It's not like, oh, we're going to be trying this and he's going to be doing it unopposed. He's not too sure on how his progression's going. But 1v1 defending, right, I'm getting beaten 3 times out of 10. Now it's going to be 5 out of 10. He's got that measurable, achievable target now.
Yeah, and so you're having that one focus, but beneath all that, there's so much detail that can go into that 1v1 defending, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there is that focus, but it's not simple at all, because each week you can be adding another layer of understanding, another improving their technique slightly, their tactical understanding, all around that one small aspect.
And their awareness as well, because they're playing against different types of players. So going, right, well, if that player's predominantly right-footed or left-footed, what might they do? Where are you on the position on the pitch? How are we going to defend? Am I going to be setting a trap to try and play them inside from a centre back to win the ball? Am I going to be forcing them down the line, do a bit of line defending? So there's all that awareness that goes with it. It's not just what am I doing to try and win the ball. It's how am I helping the unit and the team to not concede a goal, and then hopefully win possession. And how can then, well, once you've won it, now what are you doing? So it's, again, like we've mentioned before in another episode of that, before, during and after, going, you don't just win the ball. Well, I want you to retain the ball and see if you can create an attack. Don't just defend the situation. Ultimately, win the possession, play forward.
Yeah, brilliant. So you've given your players one thing to work on, and you've asked them to provide one thing. I think that's a nice balance. One from you and one from them. Some places they leave it blank, and then it's all about the player deciding everything that's talked about, and everything that every target that they have. What do you think are the advantages of your way of one from the coach and one from the player?
So at least they've got one from me. They've got something to work on, and they know it's going to be coming from sort of the coach level of going, right, I've got to be working on this because this is what other people have said. By having the discussion with the player, again, it's taking that ownership, but also it's going to be something that they're going to enjoy. So it's not going to be like stereotypically a forward having to be better at 1v1 defending, because the forward's not necessarily going to enjoy that. But it might be, I want to improve my finishing. So at least if he takes that on, he's got something he's going to enjoy. He's got that responsibility. So it's a win-win, really. And
why do you think that's important, that he has that ownership of his own target?
I think it's the same as anything. If you enjoy learning, you're going to get better at it. And then you're going to be working harder at it. And you're going to be doing more of it. Once you get that success, then you go through that cycle again, wouldn't you? So by them selecting something, it gets them enjoying it a bit more. Going, right, I've got something I'm going to be really enjoying now. So they're going to be focused and push themselves a bit further.
And what do you think is a disadvantage? And if it was completely led by the coach, what do you think the disadvantage of that would be?
Again, I think because of the ownership of the player, if it's just you've got to do this and this and this and this, the players are going to go, well, we'll see what happens.
It's not really important to me, is it?
Exactly.
Yeah, they might switch off.
Yeah.
On the flip side then, what if you gave complete ownership to that player? What might be then a disadvantage of that?
So then the player probably won't push themselves as much. As we mentioned before, never sit in a comfy chair, and I said this a lot to my players as well.
Give themselves easy challenges,
exactly.
Maybe, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so it could be someone who's really good going, I want to make better with a 5-yard pass. But no, you can already do that. So let's try and, can you make a penetrating pass? You can try and twist it to be trying to push someone to another level. So it's very, if you give them the whole ownership, then it's going to be at maybe not the level that they can achieve. And I think that's again another factor of going, we need to be pushing them forward and upwards, not just going sideways.
Yeah. And also I think making sure it applies to their game. Like your example was, if it's a centre forward, are they going to have those opportunities to actually improve that target? So that's where the coach input, I think, is really valuable, to make sure you're steering the target setting and the conversations in the right way. So the things they set for themselves, they can be worked on frequently. They're not going to have maybe once a match chance to do it.
Yeah.
It's going to be 10, 20 times, but they're going to be put in that situation to improve themselves.
Yeah, and again, that's where the target needs to be detailed for that player and the role the player wants to play in. There's no point, centre back working on his finishing. He's not going to get these opportunities, is he? So again, that's why it's really good to work together to create realistic targets.
Brilliant. So we've done this for Poulton Rovers, our junior Premier League club, and we have a more organised way of doing it. Now for someone at a grassroots club or a club that doesn't necessarily have these review evenings, Would you recommend doing this review process with with players?
Definitely. Let's be realistic. It is hard work for the coach to be doing this, and it does need it for the understanding for the player to know where they are, to have a plan going forward, and also to have that self-reflect of where they are, which works really well for the older players, so they can have that conversation possibly with themselves of going, right, what am I good at? What do I want to work on? So having these review nights are really important.
Yeah. So at Portland Rovers, we have a more formal setting. Every 6 months, we make sure we do it and a proper sit down. Now, I would highly recommend doing this at any club, even if you don't have the formal sit down. Just for yourself as a coach to have just one target for area of improvement, one target for the player for a strength to make a super strength, and then even if it's just for then a time frame of a month, that will better steer your conversations with the player. Obviously, you have that conversation with the player. Better steer all your conversations because you're focusing on the same thing. Better inform your practice design as well. So you'll create more impactful sessions in order to provide development for the players in your team. So I really recommend taking the time to write down. Don't have to be three of each. One would be good. Yeah, just for that 1 month.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. For me, I've taken away how important these reviews can be, how beneficial these reviews can be for the coach, and more importantly for the player, and also important for the actions taken from the review. Thanks very much. See you next time.
Goodbye. Bye.